Thingy.
There we go. Good evening, folks. We're live. The loyal
Okay.
scribes of divine words.
All right. Looks like we live. I want to say ETM Hotep, which is a Rimage way of greeting one another, and it means to welcome. You basically welcoming someone in peace or making sure that they're satisfied while in your presence. So again, I'll say ETM Hotep. Welcome the viewers who are watching live and those viewers who will be watching the archive of the video to another session with Seshew Medew Netcher. This is something that we call Divine Words Wednesdays, where we just give a few examples, or we're going through a series of examples of showing how Sesh Medew Netcher, which most people know as Egyptian hieroglyphs, but the indigenous name is Sesh Medew Netcher, and speaking about the script. We're basically showing people that, or how it's actually transliterated and translated. So we go through a few examples of some short inscriptions. We want to keep the time down. So this is what we do every Wednesday, and we probably do it even more. The whole idea is to get people to learn and know that, one, this can be done, two, it's being done, and then three, that if we can do it, anybody can do it. We're not anything special. We're just dedicated, as the title of the group is, Seshew Medew Netcher. Seshew means to write or to inscribe. It's the word for scribe. Seshew, or Sesh, is the word scribe. Ma'a is the word for truth, but it also means something that's true. It means something that is straight, loyal, consistent. And then you have Ni, which is the word of, and then Medew Netcher, divine words. So this is something that we are loyal to or dedicate time to actually study and learn, to have the ability to actually read and know what the ancestors, what the ancient Rimage left behind. It's a plethora of information. There's a lot of papyri, tombs, inscriptions on tomb walls, coffin, wood, statues, and so on and so forth, that the study of the language becomes mandatory in order to know what is being said and what was on the minds of the people. So this is something that we have dedicated some time to. So if we can do it, anyone can do it. And again, I'll just read something I already said. Seshew Medew Netcher. The Seshew Medew Netcher is a membership of like-minded individuals with aspirations of being loyal scribes of divine words. We embrace the importance of learning the languages of Kemet, and mind you, I said languages of Kemet, as a means to enter the world of Ancient Kemet and have a meeting of the minds with the illustrious civilization, society, culture, and people responsible for contributing so much to the world, whether realized or not. And that's important. I stress languages of Kemet because prior to about 10 years ago, the standard idea about ancient Egypt was that it had one language, and we simply call it Egyptian. And most people think that it's one language that went through several stages, and Egyptologists have divided those stages into 5 stages. But based on new linguistic data and a more rigorous scientific method being applied to the data, we come to find that there were different languages in Kemet. So this is something that we stress now to make sure everyone's updated on that. So we say languages of Kemet, and the languages are all related to one another. So they're closely related to one another, so they have some semblance to each other, but they were indeed different languages. Just wanted to make that clear. And again, our purpose is to give examples of how Sesh Medew Netcher, which is the hieroglyphic script, is translated. And in doing so, we address a few things. 1, that the Sesh Medew Netcher script has been deciphered. 2, the methods for doing so. And 3, demonstrate that with time and discipline and patience, anyone can do it. And I always stress the patience and the discipline because you have to dedicate some time and learn the different methodologies on how to do it. And this is something that we will be discussing on these Wednesday hangouts, which is method. All right, the translation method. There's four main steps, and these four steps are steps that everyone goes through, whether you're an expert, a beginner, novice, etc. These are steps that everyone has to go through. The speed in which you go through these steps will be different for your based on your proficiency and competency in performing these different steps. So it becomes faster. All right. But step one is to determine the direction in which the signs are to be read. Okay, that's a very easy step, and we'll explain each one of these steps as we go along. Step two is to identify and document each individual sign. So you have to find out how the sign functions within the different words. Step three, you then have to group the signs into words to be searched in dictionaries or vocabulary lists. And then step four, final step, is to come up with a sensible translation. All right, and we'll go through each one of these steps, explaining each one. All right, and in doing so, we select short inscriptions, to keep the time low. And this is the inscription that we chose for this Wednesday. All right, and without giving any information about the image or where it came from, we'll just jump straight into actually performing the 4 steps or the 4 methods. So with step 1, in determining the direction in which the signs are to be read, Brother Son Kofi, could you, well, actually, if you could explain, in looking at this particular picture, the direction in which the signs are to be read and why.
Okay.
Maybe go through each one of the numbers. There's only 4 sets of inscriptions, but if you can give the directions for each one and why.
Okay. Column or inscription 1 will be read from left to right, horizontal. Inscription 2 will be read from left to right, vertical, and it's being read left to right vertical because mnTw is facing that way, so the words is going from left to right. Inscription 3 is also read from left to right vertical. Inscription 4 is that which is behind Montu, is read also from left to right vertical.
Okay. Now you ran ahead. You already know it's Montu and everything, huh? So
Oh, my bad.
no. Okay, but just for clarification, in inscription number 1, if we compare inscription 1 and inscription 4, are those to be read in the same direction? Or are they in different directions?
They are in different directions.
Okay, just for clarity, I think you when you went to 2, 3, and 4, I think you said from left to right, but I believe you mean from.
I mean from right to left. I do that every time, man. From right to left. Inscription 1 is read from left to right, horizontal.
Right. Okay.
And those are read from right to left vertical. I'm sorry, I did that the last one.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, that's that's all right.
This camera come on, boy, I get nervous.
It's no problem. Okay, so but for clarification, if you could just explain it one more time.
Okay. Inscription 1 will be read from left to right vertical. Inscription 2, which is well in front of Montu, is read from right to left vertical. Inscription 3 is also read from right to left vertical, and inscription 4 is also read from left to right vertical.
All right, you did it again on number 4. That's all right though. Yeah.
I did it again?
Yeah, on number 4. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. Because I mean, we get it. So But that's good because see, in explaining it, it just lets people know that what we're looking at on the screen, even though someone can say it wrong, because any of us could say it wrong, because sometimes we slip up, our eyes going faster than what our brain or what we can articulate and say it wrong, but people are able to see it. And then if someone comes up with a question for clarification, then it lets you know that okay, they get it, they understand. So, but yeah, so dua for that. That's good. I'm just saying on number 4, you said the same thing, but it's understood now. So I'm sorry, inscription 1 is from left to right, and that will be horizontal. And columns 2, 3, and 4, all 3 of those columns are read from right to left, and those are in vertical format. All right, so now that covers step 1, and that's pretty much the fastest step. That's pretty simple. And oh, so let me back up. So you said now what was the reason why? Let's just take column 4 for example. Why do we say that it's from right to left? What gives us that indication in this column?
The cobra is facing to the right. You can look at the top, the top where the formula Djed meadow stars at. The cobra right there where your cursor at is facing toward the right. So we know that it is being read from the right. Any animal that are facing, or any pictograph that is facing toward the right, facing toward the right, will indicate that it's read from right to left. It will, if the cobra was facing to the left, then we know it would be read from left to right, vertical.
Okay. Yep. Excellent. All right, Dua. And one thing to keep in mind, what makes that easy or easier to remember is just something that we do every day, all day in our everyday communication, where we speak to people's face. So we wouldn't speak to someone's back of the head or anything. That we would consider that rude today. So likewise, when we're reading these inscriptions, you're gonna face the face of either the animals or the images of people, etc. So, like you said, if the cobra is facing to the right, you're gonna face the cobra. So therefore you're gonna read it from right to left. All right. So that's okay. So that covers step 1. And like I said, that's pretty much the fastest step because once you determine the direction, then you can proceed on. So now, step 2 is to identify and document each individual sign. Now, for the sake of time, we won't go through and identify every single sign that's in this picture, but this is something that you would definitely have to do that. We're going to just show as an example. So as an example, we can go through inscription number 2, and we can go through and identify these signs. So so on demo, if you can use inscription number 2 and walk us through each sign, and actually what tools do you use to actually do this as well? Maybe you can explain that.
Hotep. Now, when we start to look at a glyph, we notice these different signs, and what we use is a sign list. Now, there's a common sign list used that was organized by Sir Alan H. Gardner in his Egyptian grammar. Where he takes 26 main categories and place everything in a category. If you're looking at a man doing something, this man in his occupation, you're looking at body parts. You see the eyes, the legs. He has a category for that as well. Even when you go down to the lower section, he has category for the low broad signs. So if you're looking at a glyph, you say, hey, I can't really see what that is, you can go to the low broad signs. It'll pull up the low broad signs and show you things to look at to where you can compare. So as we start off into this glyph we're looking at now, we're looking at column number 2, and first thing we notice is a cobra. Again, we're going from right to left, so we're looking into the face, and it looks like a cobra. So I will go and I identify it and find out where it's at on the sign list. Okay, so I'm looking over here in the eyes. The eyes have the amphibious animals, the reptiles, etc. So we'll go look in here for this cobra sign that we see on this glyph. So you go down I1, I9, you see turtles, you see all these different signs. And here we have it down here, I10, cobra. So now we have identified this glyph that we have just noticed. We have identified this sign that we just noticed, and now we can write down all the identifying markers that go along with this sign. We see the gardener code, we see the description, we also see the function, whether it function as a logogram, as a phonogram, we all can see. And we will write down all this information as we go through this glyph and try to put it all together. So we'll go into the next sign inside this column. Now, if you notice, it's broken off. Typically, when it's broken off like that, you would come back to it once you gathered all the other information off the other signs, and you will see where it fits in, what makes sense, what information you have come up for it. And typically, you'll see a lot of repetitive stuff. So you should have no problem finding that broken sign. But for time's sake, we have already went through and figured out the broken sign because it's compared to column 4. If you look over at column 4, you almost have the exact same statement beginning. You'll see that cobra there, and you'll see that sign. So assuming that it's the same sign, I will go look for that sign right now and see if we can find it on the sign list. So I will go look down in the crowns, dress, and staffs section. All right, we start looking at the different crowns. This is just for the sake of time. I'm already knowing what section it's going to be in, but we're going to go through it, scroll down real quick. Still looking on the sign list, looking at comparable signs. And here we have it. Walking stick. It's the sign right here. So we will write down all the information, the function of it, what it is, the cardinal code to it, and we're still gathering information, getting these signs down. We'll go to the next one. And we did this last week on this particular sign. If you went over that video there and you've kind of put in a little work and try to build, as we build this together, you would realize that it was an X where we found it at, and it was an X, and it was X8, the conical loaf. Write down all the information. So as we go down this column 2, we started gathering all the information. We end up finding out below that conical loaf, you have a water ripple. That sign right there is a water ripple. That water ripple is going to become very familiar to you. Again, it's one of the monoliterals that you study. We always encourage people to get the monoliterals, and if at least get those monoliterals. It's like the basics, the alphabets to it, and that water ripple is one of the monoliterals. So as we keep going down on the glyph, you'll run into the basket with the handle. Underneath the basket with the handle, we'll identify there's a palm branch. But you'll see, we'll show you the information later on. Beneath the palm branch, we identify the guinea, the fowl. That twisted sign next to the fowl, we identified a wick. It's called a wick. V28. Below that, again, you have the cobra. We see the flat loaf, the bread loaf, and land. That's the identification for all the signs we see in column 2. And further on, we're going to show you how we put those together and group them together to come up with a good meaning for them and what they mean. But once again, you can always, once you get into it, don't get intimidated. Look at the glyph. Start looking at each sign. Go find it in the sign list. Write down all the functions, all the information you can to it. Once you do that for each sign, then you can go on to the next step.
Okay, Iker, excellent. Excellent. And now I'm not sure if the screen switched over to your screen, you know, in sharing, in showing the actual sign list, but there is a tutorial available on the website, www.mdw-nTr.com, mdw-nTr.com, that goes into more detail about that. All right, but excellent. That's a good explanation. So now that we've done step 2. Now you would do that for the entire inscription, and for time's sake, we just explained for inscription number 2 here, but you have to identify. Now the good thing about it is that the more you do this, the more familiar you're going to become with the different signs from the top of your head from memory. So step 2 is going to get shorter and shorter the more you do this and the more familiar you become with the different signs. Now at this particular point, before you sit down and want to transliterate and translate inscriptions, there's a lot of information that you would already have to be proficient in, and you would have to have memorized the monoliterals for one, and even some of the biliterals and triliterals, and you have to even know what those are. So maybe sonnet tonica, if you can just explain the advantage of having the different signs memorized, whether it's the monoliterals or even more, like what is the benefit of doing that?
Hotep, I would just say that knowing what the signs are, what they mean, the functions and their values, would actually really, really, really shorten the process that we're doing. I think that's the step 2, where for example, when you have to identify the signs, I know a lot of people might think that, oh, it might be like tasking to try to go through all of that, all of the signs, and because this is just a small inscription, and most of the time you might be working with larger inscriptions and stuff like that. But then instead of identifying all the signs that are on the inscription, it will be, the process would actually be shortened in a way that you'd be looking, for example, on this inscription, you'd look at the signs that you don't know instead of the signs that you know. So then I think in a way it's like you take less time, and you act. Yeah, go on.
No, I'm saying that's a good and that's an important point. That's a good point, because instead of identifying the signs that you do know, then you'll start to identify just the ones you don't know. So basically, when people sit down and look at an inscription, there's going to be some signs that you already know, like Son Kofi did. Excuse me, Son Kofi did at first. He mentioned the direction in front of Montu. So that means right at the start he already knew who this was inside of the picture because of the inscription in number 3. This is something that if you do this for a while, you'll just be able to read it, and so that's a good point to point out, and that by itself will shorten the time, because you won't spend the time on things that you do recognize, and plus step 2 is a data collecting step. So if you already know something, then you won't have to go out and collect the data for it. You already have it stored in memory. So, okay, that's good. And that will cover step 2. And like I said, we're not, for the sake of time, we're not going to identify every single sign. And also, if you notice, column 2 or inscription number 2, inscription number 4, they start off with the same set of signs and actually end with the same group of signs as well. And that's another thing that speeds the process up, because if you're going to collect the information about signs, once the signs start repeating themselves, then obviously you don't have to go and look for it again. So that's another instance where the process will be shorter and shorter. Okay, so now just to show you an example, okay, we're going to take inscription number 2, and this is the information, and just in case you weren't able, the viewers weren't able to see what Brother Damo was doing with the sign list, this is the information that you would collect, and this is the information that reflects column 2, or inscription that's labeled number 2. So if I go back to the inscription here on the right hand side, this is the information that you would find in the sign list, and this is the information you would document. Now if you were actually writing this down, it wouldn't be necessary for you to rewrite or redraw the actual picture, the actual sign itself, or even the description. But the two main pieces of information you definitely want to document would be the Gardner code, which is here in the left-hand column, and then how that particular sign can possibly function. So we see here that the cobra has possible functions as a logogram or as a phonogram. Okay, and then like I said, there's, you would, at this point, you would already know what a logogram is and what a phonogram is, et cetera, et cetera. But just in short, a logogram is a sign that stands for an entire word. Hence the word logogram. The word logo comes from logos, which means word. And then you have a phonogram. The word phone means sound. So this particular sign can stand for an entire word, or this sign can stand for a particular sound. And in this case, it would be a monosyllable, a single consonant sound. All right. And so this is two pieces of information that you definitely want to document. But here you see the list of all the signs that's in column 2. But notice that the water ripple here is only listed once, but you see it twice. And like I said, there's no need to write it twice because it's the same sign. So this is what your end results will be for column 2 in particular. But you would have to do this for the entire inscription. All right. So now moving to step 3. Step 3 involves taking all of these signs that you have written down, and now you have to group the signs. We call it parsing. You have to parse these signs and group them into words to be looked up into dictionaries. I'm going to get ahead of myself. So, Son Setep and Ra, if you can explain the process of group the signs, you can use column 2 as well, just for time's sake. And also, what tools do you use in step 3?
Okay, in step 3, I like to use the Vigus. Like I stated before, I like to use the Vigus in step 3. And when looking at the signs, I mean, when somebody's speaking, you're always going to see the Sesh Medew formula because it's words spoken. And then after that, it's going to be either Sesh Medew-N or Sesh Medew-D or Sesh Medew-D-N-E-N-A. And I'll get into that here shortly. But the first signs I'm going to identify, and let me pull up my dictionary, because like I stated on the last show, I like to use manual decodage, but this show I'm going to go ahead and use the Gardner code so we can just get straight to the point.
Pardon me for a second, though.
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure. Because as I'm sharing my I can tell, but I'm actually looking at on my mobile, and I'm still seeing the screen.
Okay.
I'm seeing what I'm showing.
His screen is up. But I see the Vigus.
Okay, but it has to share. There we go. All right.
Yeah, see it?
To the viewers. Okay, good. We're good now.
All right. So the first sign, we got I-10. Oh yeah. And when you're using the Vigus, we got a tutorial on the mdw Netcher site too on how you should use the Vigus, and one of the specifics in there, this should be case sensitive, and you should use whole words only. So watch the tutorial and it'll give a better explanation of what I'm saying, but just for time's sake, case sensitive and whole words only. So I'm gonna type in the capital letter I-10, then you gotta space it. I'm gonna say I-10 space, then you put the dash in there, and then you put S, capital S, 4-3. So that's Sesh Medew right there. Let's see what we get. Okay, pop right up. And here we have, let's see, here it is right here, if y'all can see my cursor. It says Sesh Medew, recitation, words spoken by, or words to be spoken. to be pronounced. Now, after that, we have what we got after that? Oh, the D and E and A. Oh, yeah, I have to get into that because that's not actually in the dictionary. So, the conical bread loaf is the next sign, and then you have two water ripples, and then the basket. I believe I'm right. I can't see the screen. So,
That's correct.
that's correct. Okay. So, if anybody who's watching, you should get Wu Zhao's book, Beginner's Introduction to mnTw Netcher, and I'm going to page, if you have the book, I'm going to page 237. So if you have the book, go to page 237. And it's an example of this in here. And I'm going to read straight from the pages. It says, the column starts with the Sesh Medew formula. Words spoken. Without a name following, but instead is immediately followed by the text being spoken. The next sign, D, is part of the verb RD, already, give. And together with the first N, or the water ripple sign, represent a short form of the phrase DNE, I have given. The first suffix pronoun I is omitted. The second N is a short form of the derivative phrase in ek, to you. So basically what it's saying is, words spoken, I have given to you.
Mm-hmm.
And you find in the U part is the bread loaf, and I can look that up as well. The bread loaf is V31. Now it's going to be a lot of baskets that pop up. So see, if you're looking at the screen, it's 1,437 instances where this pops up at. So for time's sake, I've already done the research on it, and it's going to be on page 2077. So I'm going to just jump straight to there. And we find it right here by itself. And it's a suffix pronoun saying you or your. Now, in instances, it could be a stative past tense, or it can say KY again. But in this instance, it's saying I have given to you. The next word we have is what's that? Renin Puet. So it's M4 repeated 4 times. Now, in doing this inscription, this is one of the words that I had to look up because I didn't know this off the top of my head. The Sesh Medew, D, and E, and Ek, I knew that off the top of my head just from dealing with step 1 and step 2, which you'll get familiar with if you study the language and you do it all the time. So let's look up this word right here, and I'm going to do Gardner code on this one. So I'm going to type in capital M4 space capital M4 space capital M4. Let's see what we get. All right, it appears 3 times in here, but if you look at the search engine right here, these bottom 2 wouldn't be the one. So it's this one right here. And it means years. It's a plural noun. So it's saying words spoken. I have given to you years. Now let's see what's the next sign after that. We have we got the water ripples, the bird, and then the twisted flax. If I'm going off the top of my head, so be patient with me.
No, that's correct.
That's correct. Okay. So we got N35 space. And this bird, all the birds are in the G column. All the birds. So it's going to be G21. Then you have space. You put your dash right there, and then you got V28. See what this gives us. All right, it's a couple instances on here where this shows up. It's about 21 of them, but let's see if this right here is the one. Boom, there. Well, no, it's not that one. It's the one right below that one. And it's mdw-nTr, which means eternity or forever. And that's on page 1203 in the Vigus. So we have words spoken. I have given to you years for eternity. And then we have another combination of glyphs. And this combination of glyphs is real common. It's jet. I already know that. I already know that's the end of the column. And it's the cobra, which is I-10. We looked that up earlier. Space. The bread loaf, X1. And then the last sign is the flat land, which is going to be N18. See what we get when we type that in. Okay, we have 4 instances right here where this is. So let's go to the first one and see. Okay, boom, that's the one I'm looking for. We have eternity or everlasting or forever. So in translating this, we would say, words spoken. I have given to you years of eternity forever. And that's basically the steps and the methods to the dictionary and how we use it, or how I like to use it. But when you want to be real precise, because y'all seen in the last show how I typed in manual decodage and it gave me all different types of instances and I had to look through it. But when you type in the Gardner codes, it sends you straight to the point. And sometimes inscriptions might be omitted, so it might not look how it looks in the dictionary, and this is where you have to be a little bit flexible, because you got to be flexible when you're dealing with this, because you transliterating something and then you translating it into English. So it's a process. You have to do detective work and you have to be flexible. You don't want to stress yourself out. If you feel like this is too much, just sit it to the side, come back to it tomorrow. You ain't got to work yourself. Don't overwork yourself with doing this, because it can be done. It can be done. And that's the end of column 4. So I'm gonna pass it back to Ujao.
Okay, excellent. Good. I'm looking at it on my and when you were I'm hearing an echo.
Hold on, I might have to mute my mic.
Okay. Yeah, and as you were looking up the words, we can't see your actual search window, but we can see the results. So when you clicked when you entered the search and you clicked enter to actually find it, the results they did come up. So just wanted to let the viewers know that what you were typing in before, none of us could see that at first, but we can see the results of it, which is what counts. But yeah, that's really good. Now I do have a question that most people would have in step 3, and this is a question that I get a lot, and that is, once you complete step 2 results in something like this. So if you identified all of the different signs, then you're going to have a sheet of paper with all a list of the signs that you're dealing with, and then how they function. You have the Gardner code and then how it functions. But the question comes, when you move to step 3, how do you know what signs go with each other to form words? So maybe one of you all can explain what helps us to determine that? What helps us to group these signs and know when a word begins and when a word ends, and so on and so forth? And any one of you all can jump in and explain that.
Well, I know determinatives will help with figuring out where a word ends if you have determinatives.
Okay, right. And that's really a very big help, because once you start to understand what determinatives are, and in doing this process over and over again, and you put time and practice into it, you'll start to recognize determinatives on sight, just like how At this point, you should have the monoliterals memorized, and monoliterals being those signs that represent single consonants. Those are considered uniliterals or monoliterals, depending on who you're talking to. But it simply means single consonantal signs. But determinatives are signs that help you determine the meaning of the word or the signs that come before it. And the reason why it helps us to determine the groupings of signs into words is because determinatives come at the end of the words. So that's a very big helpful hint. When you recognize a determinative, you know that's the end of a word, and then the signs after it will obviously be the beginning of a new word. Okay, so but that's not the case all the time, because all the words, like the column that was just done, all of the words don't have determinatives. So that's just one of the ways. You know, there's other ways to do it as well.
Yeah.
But that's a big indication.
Yeah, another way I learned too was, as you stated before, was becoming more familiar with the signs, and so you're knowing the signs which represent a word, and you're knowing through your rigorous study which signs have to go along with other signs. That's another way of telling. Also, along with knowing the determinatives. For instance, the Ankh sign. ANX, you're understanding that it's not connected. It is a word in itself, so you know there's a word, there's nothing before it. I mean, it could be a prefix, or I haven't seen one, but there could be other words that come after it or before it, but that in itself is the word. So you're knowing that that stands alone by itself, so you know that's a cutoff point right there. And then you can formulate that into a sentence, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. And one other indicator would be you having familiarity with some basic grammar with the different suffixes. We have suffix pronouns and things like that. And obviously, for the namesake suffix, it's suffixed onto a word, so it comes at the end of words as well. So recognizing those, you will also be able to pick up on how to group these different words. So like I said, there's information that by this point in time that people will sit down and attempt to transliterate and translate, that there's information that you would already have learned and studied. So, you know, I don't want to make it seem like there's a lot of information missing. You know, we're doing this for the sake of time, just showing pretty much just the gist of how this process works, and emphasizing method, the 4 different steps. So that was step 3. And you would do that obviously for all of the inscriptions on whichever image that you're working with. So that was just for inscription number 2, that's labeled 2. And you would do the same thing for 1, 3, and 4 as well. So once you do that, well, let me just give indicator of what you would have. Okay, so here are the dictionary entries of what Seshew had given. So we see that the first grouping is found in the Vigus dictionary on page 730, and then it gives you the transliteration as a match, and then it gives you the definition. It also gives you those Gardner codes that that was the way in which he looked it up this time. In the previous session or hangout, he used manual decodage. Okay, so those are 2 different ways to use this dictionary. All right, so she's showing you both ways. And the second one was the conical loaf, and it's found on page 2210. And it tells you what the word is, transliterated, and then the meaning, and so on and so forth. So this is what you would find for column 2, or column label number 2. All right, and you would do that for all the columns. So for the sake of time, we're just showing column 2. And once you're done, you this is what you would have from step 2 and step 3. So now you have your transliteration from step 2 in identifying all of the signs, and then combining that with step 3, you now know where all of these words are separated to form words, I should say. And these are the words that you're going to be looking up. And column 2, which will be number 2 here, Sesh Medew Netcher, Renput, Nehijet. So this is something that you would be able to look up each individual word, and this is the result. So that was excellent. All right, and then step 4. Step 4 and final step is to come up with a sensible translation. All right, and now in doing a translation, this is where 2 or more people may have something slightly different from one another. But at step 2, for transliteration would be done in step 2. You would walk away with the same as the next person, because transliteration is more of an exact science based on the transliteration system that's being used. So if we're all going to use manual decodage transliteration system, and we're all dealing with the same picture, then we should all have the exact same results. All right, and if we would choose the diacritic transliteration system, and we're using the same picture, all of us will still have the exact same results. But now that's different from translations. Translations will vary slightly because there's rarely instances where you can translate something from a source language to a target language one for one. Okay, there's always a barrier of grammar, differences in grammar where you may have to add an extra word here or there. And then within a particular language, the target language, there's so many synonyms for a particular definition or meaning that I may choose one word to represent that, and the next person may choose a different word, but they'll be synonymous with each other. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And so this is the final step in step 4, coming up with a sensible translation. So here is the translation of the entire inscription. And now, mind you, even at this step, once you do this a lot, not only will it cut down on step 2, let me go back to step 2. Not only will it cut down on step 2 because you'll be able to identify the sign, because in identifying the sign, you're only concerned with the Gardner code and how it functions. But sometimes you're just going to get used to words. And that's what we saw with Son Kofi when he immediately knew that this was Montu, what people call Montu, but in the actual column here we see it as mnTw, but people pronounce it Montu. And Son Setep recognized the first group of glyphs here immediately and said Jed Medu, D and E and Nek. So even step 3 and step 4 will just become a lot faster the more that you do this. And something that we skipped, I believe, last week and tonight is something that's called phonetic complements. And I do see a phonetic complement in column label number 2. So here, for this word here, if you can see my cursor, this word for eternity, Nehi. So maybe one of you all can explain what phonetic complements are and which sign out of this group here would be considered a phonetic complement and why. Anybody want to take on that?
Yeah. Well, if you look up the first sign, which is the bird, it'll give you the transliteration of N capital H. And then the next sign, if you look that up, will give you a transliteration of capital H. So basically, when the second sign, the sign after the first sign agrees or matches with the last sign of the last letter of the first sign, is basically complementing the first sign.
Okay, good. All right. Now this one is tricky because of the word neh or nehi. It could be either or. in this particular instance, but the point is the same, is that like you said, this particular bird here, and the word I was looking for is biliteral. Okay, this particular sign is a biliteral, and when you have biliterals or triliterals, and what those mean, bi means two, so it's basically a sign that represents two consonants, and then a triliteral, tri means three, so it's a sign that represents three consonants, such as the word for unk. This sign right here is a triliteral because it has three consonants in it. We pronounce it as unk, but it actually is three consonants. This particular bird here represents two, so it's called a biliteral. So when you have biliterals and triliterals, more often than not, they will also have next to them a what's called a phonetic complement. And a phonetic complement is a sign that represents a consonant within the biliteral or triliteral, all right, and it is not transliterated as well. So this is the lowercase n, capital H, and this is a capital H, so this would appear to be a phonetic complement to that. All right, so I just wanted, we didn't discuss that last week, but that's something that we would have to keep in mind, and something that we would know at this point in time anyway, but I just wanted to bring that up to explain it to the viewers. This particular inscription altogether doesn't have any phonetic complements that we can really show any more examples of, but we'll show maybe next time in the next one if we see some.
Well, a common one actually is in 3 we have the min game board, and then after that we have the water ripple, and that's something might be a little common.
Yeah, actually, yes, definitely. That's a good one to point out. So yeah, as you said, so min, this first sign here is a biliteral, and then the water ripple here, this is a biliteral for the consonants m and n, so we pronounce that min. And the water ripple represents n, but it's a complement because it represents the n that's within this biliteral here. Okay, so that's a good example as well. So between the two, we have the two examples, and this is where we get mnTw, but most of us pronounce it Montu, and that's who we're dealing with. This Netcher here, standing here, is Montu or mnTw. Okay, so with all of that being said, and for the sake of time, we didn't go through all of the different inscriptions on here as far as breaking them down, but the final step is to come up with a sensible translation. Now this is the transliteration of all of them, of all of the different columns, okay, here that we see here. And then to move to translation, what we have from column 1, or inscription number 1, we have he of Behudet, the great god, many colored of plumage, lord of Mesen. Now a lot of people may have the problem with the word God, but in that instance, the word God, I'll go back to the picture here. If you look in inscription 1, this is the word Netcher, and that's usually translated as God. But like I said, some people may have a problem with the word God. And if that's the case, you could substitute for divine, divinity, or leave it as Netcher, long as what's being conveyed is understood. All right, so going back down. So we have he of Behudet, the great Netcher, many colored of plumage, lord of Mesen. And then in number 2, Son Setep already gave this, word spoken, I have given to you years of eternity forever. And then Son Confi let the cat out the bag early. And inscription 3 is the name Montu or mnTw. All right, and then the last column is words spoken. I have given to you all life and stability like Ra forever. And if you notice, number 2 and number 4, they start off the same. Words spoken, and then I have given to you. And then everything after is a little different. And we can see that if we go back to the picture, the translation is the same at the beginning of both of those statements, and then we can see the glyphs or the Sesh Medew Netcher being the same up until this point. So everything after is different, and then the last word should be the same. So if we have the last word here as jet, the last word in column 2 as jet, then therefore in our translation, that last word is the same, forever, and then in number 4 we have forever. All right, so that's pretty much how the process goes. And if there's anything that I may have forgotten to mention, anybody have anything else that they want to mention or bring up and cover, now would be a very good time.
Hotel, this is June. I just wanted to say, I appreciate everybody tuning in and watching. But check the description box down below, because after the show we go through and add in the transliteration and translation, so you can also see it there. Also, we have all our links in the description box to our Facebook group, our web page, to the sign list, and also, man, if anybody has suggestions, leave them in the comment box, join our Facebook group, and just shoot us, suggestions or anything that people would like to see. And that's about it for that.
All right, anybody else have anything else to bring up? Something that we may have missed?
Well, if no one else is going to say anything, I wanted to also add that if this is interesting to anybody or interest, just jump in. If you don't get the beginner's introduction to mdw Netcher written by our Saba, get another book. Get some kind of mdw Netcher book. Just get familiar with the monoliterals. Start working on memorizing your monoliterals. Get familiar with the biliterals and triliterals, and just keep working at it.
Okay, good. And I do, I repeatedly said that, at this point in time, when a person sits down and is ready to transliterate and translate, there's some information that you're going to already be required to know and would have already studied up to bring you up to this point. And for that, I've been teaching a beginner's level of Sesh Medew Netcher for about 4 years, plus or minus. Now, and I have a beginner's book and also offer a beginner's course, an interactive course, and then a self-study course. Self-study being that you get the book and you're able to go at your own pace and go through the book step by step, chapter by chapter, and then log on to the website and do the book exercises as you go along. And then at the end of the book, all of the information is culminated into a final exam where you put all that you learned in the previous chapters and you put it all together and you actually apply it and answer the different questions. There's a 100-question certification exam and then an essay, and the essay is really you choosing one of the available transliteration pictures, selecting from a few of them, and then actually doing what we just went through tonight, taking a picture and going from step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4, and then submitting that. And upon success, you'll be certified and would have completed the course. So that's what's offered at our website, and the website is www. Let me go to the last slide here. www.mdw-ntr.com, mdw-nTr.com. So that's the book, and also flashcards. Now it's very, very important to memorize the monoliterals. I can't stress that enough. I stress that in the book, and I always stress it to people in class and who are not participating in class at all. But it's very important to memorize the monoliterals when doing this type of work, because that will help you do a lot of other things. Because once you memorize the monoliterals, as Sonnet Tonica said, that then you'll be able to recognize what's not a monoliteral. And And then from there, it will relate to other things. So whatever's not a monoliteral, it's going to be a biliteral or triliteral, and therefore biliterals and triliterals are usually accompanied by a phonetic complement. And then, so you see how everything kind of works together. All these clues work together. And, doing this type of work, you do become a detective. You got to be open-minded, as Satep said. So, and it's not hard at all. This is easy. And, there's some impressions that people have that the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, or as we know it to be Sesh Medew Netcher, is like an elite language that only, a handful of people in Kemet dealt with, or that it was, only the priest that dealt with it and things like that. And that's just not the case, because they're, overall in the society as a whole, the scribes, the Seshew, the different scribes are the ones who were proficient and went into the profession of dealing with the language. And the scribal profession was very, very a very high esteemed profession. It was looked upon as something that was definitely something that you wanted to be a part of and get involved with. But it is an African tradition among a lot of African communities where whole entire bloodlines and families are attached to a particular trade. Like for example, the warrior class of a people may consist of only a very few bloodlines of people, brothers and cousins and uncles and fathers, but they're all interrelated in some form or fashion. Just like you have scribes may come from a few families, that spread wide, and so on and so on. So this is a pretty common African tradition, and I think that's where a lot of people may confuse that with the eliteness of the language, and the fact that the Sesh Medew Netcher itself, in order to carve it into the stones, the various different stone wood, it was definitely a specialized trade that you learned at a young age, and you kept at it for a very, very long time. All right, and then there's a difference between actually drawing with the ink and the quill or the pen, or the stylus reed, or versus actually using masonry tools. Actually carving, chiseling, and carving into the stones. So you had to have a combination of masonry skills and drawing skills, or both. Or artists would come in and draw it, and then the masonry type of scribes would come in and actually carve it. And you can actually see this in Kemet. You can see some unfinished locations in tombs where you can see the artist actually drew the imagery, the images from the inscriptions to the large images, and they're still there, where it's partly carved and partly not carved. You can even see the lines, the grid lines. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that. But this is not hard. This is something that we're doing, and we do it all the time, and we're just sharing it with you all, who are watching it live or will watch it in the archives. And it's something we'll do every Wednesday, Divine Words Wednesday. So with that, does anybody else have anything else to say, or bring up anything that we missed? Or even any questions that you think that other people may ask?
Yeah, Hotep. First, I'd like to welcome Saint Antoine, who just came in, and I would also like to just ask, on behalf of probably some of the viewers that might be watching this, because they might be just seeing us transliterating, and reading all the glyphs and whatnot, and somebody might be thinking, it's so cool, but why do I need to learn all this? What is it going to help me with? If anybody can answer that.
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's a question that comes up every now and then. Some people may see this as a frivolous endeavor, like like a hobby. Okay, like, okay, what good does it does it do me to learn a quote unquote dead language? You know, I've seen people say that and make those kind of comments. You know, Sesh Medew Netcher or the Egyptian language is a dead language. It doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't put food on my table and things like that. Well, that would be a direct benefit of learning the language. And since people don't see that, then they think that there's no benefit whatsoever. But one of the benefits of learning any language of any culture, whether the language is dead or not, is to open the way to tap into the mind of the people of that particular culture. So, and it's the same for any culture. So, for example, even if you are let's say you are a follower of the Hebrew faith or of Judaism, then it's to your advantage to learn Hebrew, the Hebrew language, so that you can read the scriptures or the inscriptions that are left that are documented in that particular language. That way you can have a more direct and closer interpretation or view of what's being said, of the intended meanings, and so on and so forth. Same thing with Islam. If you are a Muslim, it will be to your advantage to learn Arabic, so that you can read the Quran in Arabic, and you can feel closer to the culture, closer to the mindset of the people who actually documented that particular traditions and culture in that particular language. So here we are with ancient Egypt or Kemet, and it's no different. There's a plethora of documentation, you know, probably the most of any culture, that's stored in all these different various museums, still on site in Egypt today, at the Egyptian Museum, and so on and so forth, that's written in the languages of Kemet or Egypt. So it's to our advantage that if we want to know about the culture, know about the people, and how did they become so great, because everyone can agree, whether you dislike it or not, everyone has to bear witness of the greatness of Kemet, you know, based on even what is left behind, and then what the contemporary peoples and cultures during that ancient time, what they've even said about Kemet. For example, the Greeks. Everyone can agree to that. So the question becomes, well, how did these people become so great? How did the Egyptians become so great? How did the Egyptians pull off what they pulled off? You know, what were they studying? What kind of systems did they have in place to raise the mental giants of that day and time? And the only way that we can answer that, or even begin to answer that, is to at least learn the language so that we can read through the text and the documentation that they left behind. Because Kemet was a very literate civilization, meaning that it wrote, has a lot of documentation, lots and lots and lots of documentation. So that's an indirect benefit, because once we do that, then we can actually learn, and we can use Kemet as a resource to figure out what can we use from that resource today in 2016. Should we pattern our institutions of learning and structure them the same way that they did in Kemet? Now, obviously, we're you know, thousands of years removed, and we're geographically removed from the location of where Kemet is today. So not everything is going to be applicable, but the principles and the foundations and the systems that were in place to produce that greatness, we can actually adopt, or we can determine if we can adopt it or not. So I'm saying, so even to determine if it's something we can use or not use, we still have to learn the language so we can you know, analyze it and take a proper assessment of what's going on. So, you know, those are the things I could think off the top of my head of the advantage of learning a language. And another thing is that other cultures or other people other than Africans they've realized this. They realize what I've said. And, you know, for example, you have Germans or different European communities. They saw the importance or the value in Kemet. They saw that right away, so much so that they created a whole scientific field to study Kemet. They call it Egyptology, which is the study of Egypt. So they created an entire scientific field just to study Egypt. You don't find that with other cultures or other countries in Africa or anywhere else. You don't see like, just for example, you don't see something that says uh, uh, what's a good example? Zuluology. Just as an example for South Africa, among the Zulus, you don't see a scientific study of Zuluology or any ology of these other things, but they felt it necessary to create a study of Egypt, though, because of the value that they saw in Egypt. So we need to see the same value in it and do an intense study. And one of the first ways is to get into the language. That's the only way we're going to tap in and allow the ancestors to speak directly to us. We don't need a middleman. We don't need the middleman to interpret for us that which we can learn ourselves and deal directly with the ancestors. So that's just something that, that I see right from the start and off the top of my head of the benefits, So hopefully that kind of, covered the question. I know I got a little long-winded with that, but
Yeah, all right.
It's true though. For thousands of years, they've been going down there studying. What should stop us? You know what I mean? They've been going for thousands of years out there studying all this stuff. So we should do it too.
And just for clarification, in case someone out there may be thinking, when we see glyphs and we see writing from historical ancient writing, is there a do we focus on it all? Do we study it all? Is there a time period that's common to most folk? Because a lot of people are knowing that there were invaders, and we've heard about them plagiarizing a lot of stuff. Could you clarify? Is there a common period that everyone is trying to get into that's not? I've heard the word pre-dynastic. These are just some questions someone may be thinking.
oh yeah. Well, the thing is that we're dealing with material culture. So writing is the one that's very prominent when a civilization starts to write, and they leave a lot of written records behind. So Kemet is one of the civilizations that has a whole lot of writing. Prior to writing, or the record, or the attestation of written records, then you have to apply different approaches of analysis, of analyzing and trying to come up and answering these types of questions. So when people say pre-dynastic, they have to make a distinction. Are they talking about the pre-writing system? Because if you're dealing with pre-writing system, then obviously you're going to have to use different means of trying to understand the culture. And most of the time they're using the material culture from archaeology, where they're dealing with the pottery, they're dealing with the graves sites, they're dealing with other things, the mode in which food was produced, the different tools and things like that. But when you enter into the era of time of writing, then the people themselves can clarify all of that. So just by common logic, that the difference between the era of writing versus the era before writing is that, one, you have to apply different methodology to study those two separate eras of time, and then overall the era of writing will offer a little bit more clarity, because it's more detailed and people are actually voicing and speaking for themselves, as opposed to just looking at the different material artifacts that are left behind, a lot of it being damaged over time, or some of it being preserved. Whether it's preserved or damaged or not, you're still going to apply different methodologies to have a close to accurate interpretation as possible. But the writing era provides more detail and more clarity, because the people themselves are actually telling you what's what, why they do what they do, how they did what they did, and so on and so forth. So it just depends on the era of time and what your analysis is all about. So even within Egyptology itself, you have the different subfields that involves what you asked about. And then in anthropology, all together, there's different disciplines that cover a wide range of scientific inquiry. Under the umbrella of anthropology, you have linguistics, you have archaeology, and so on and so forth. Even genetics is part of that. So and this also leads into where you have African scholars that are actually showing more of a multidisciplinary approach to studying the past, whereas people, maybe 50 years ago, they have this segmented approach to studying the past, where different disciplines weren't even exchanging data or communicating with one another. But the African school of anthropology is more so interrelating all of the different scientific fields. So we're looking at genetics, we're looking at linguistics, we're looking at the material culture left through archaeology, and so on and so forth, and we're putting the bigger picture together. So it doesn't really matter what era. It's just that people need to know what methods and what sciences to apply to that given era of time. So hopefully that kind of addresses that question for people. Was that it? Any comments, questions?
Yeah.
No? All right, well, I hope. Oh, go ahead.
I was saying I think that's it.
Okay. Well, yeah, I don't want to. I don't know how long we've been on, but I hope people can benefit from these Divine Words Wednesdays, and if like June said, if there's any suggestions that people have, or even questions, maybe we can open the panel up or open up the question and answer app next time for people to have questions that are watching live, or ask a question. Another thing we didn't mention, I think it's going to be a link in the description, is the Facebook group, a Seshew mdw Netcher Facebook group. If you're not a member of the group, join the group, and you can ask questions in the group. We do our best to answer the questions, and or at least point you in the right direction to answer the questions. But if that's it, hope everyone enjoyed this Wednesday's Divine Words Wednesdays. And when we depart one another, just like the greeting, we say ETM Hotep when we greet one another. When we depart, we say Shemim Hotep. And the word Shem means to leave or to exit, and Imhotep would be in peace. Hotep literally means an offering, but as we explained last time, an offering, the derived meanings of giving an offering or dealing with an offering is to bring about a state of satisfaction, or a state of peace, or a state of rest, or a state of stillness, tranquility, etc. That's where you get this notion of peace from. So we say Shemim Hotep, where I want you to leave satisfied, just like I welcome you with satisfaction. I think someone brought it up last week that's a African custom that we still do to this very day, even in the South. I know it's prevalent in the South. Here in the South, I'm in Georgia, but you hear about this Southern hospitality, and when you go over someone's house, and a lot of us probably will remember this when we were little, you go over someone's house, they immediately offer you something to drink or some food. If it's dinner time, supper time as they call it, they offer you a plate of food, and you would almost get in trouble if you turn it down. If you were young and you turn anything down, your parents will may backhand you one or two times. You're supposed to. They consider it disrespectful to turn down an offering, but that tradition goes all the way back to Africa, and it's still practiced, everywhere, where you offer something to people, whether it's a cup of tea, some water, somebody coming to your house, you're like, hey, make yourself at home. We say, make yourself at home. We'd like something to drink. Those are forms of Hotep. Instead of saying it, we just do it. So it's no different. But anyway, we if that's it, we just say Shemim Hotep, and we'll see you all next week.
Shemem-hotep.
Shemem-hotep.
Shimon Hotep.
Shimon Hotep.